Zimbabwe, a country known for great wildlife, Victoria Falls, and above all, gold mines. But could you imagine that they had to print trillion-dollar notes because $1 became equal to trillions of Zimbabwean dollars? Today, we are going to see how a country with so many resources became one of the worst economies to exist. But let's have a look at the current situation of Zimbabwe first. Zimbabwe currently. Modern Zimbabwe, situated in the southern part of Africa, is a nation with approximately 17 million people residing on its relatively uneventful territory. Zimbabwe's economy doesn't boast a wide array of industries. They say no country can truly be self-sufficient without industries, and Zimbabwe is no exception. This reliance on farming makes them heavily dependent on trade with other nations. However, Zimbabwe's landlocked location complicates its situation. We will discuss it in detail soon. As a result of all of these complications, Zimbabwe exhibits one of the lowest GDPs around the world. Now the question arises why a resource-rich country suffered such a devastating downfall. For this, we have to get back into how this country actually operates. Where things went wrong. Things actually went wrong when Zimbabwe got colonized. Everyone thinks that gold was the reason why Zimbabwe got colonized, but besides gold, Zimbabwe also exports items like diamonds, nickel, and tobacco, although their import list is extensive, covering essential modern goods including food, energy, chemicals, vehicles, clothing, and industrial supplies. This limited scope of trade makes Zimbabwe highly susceptible to domestic market fluctuations. In prosperous times, they fare relatively well, but during economic downturns, they suffer more severely than most other nations. They're unable to cushion economic shocks through international trade, which underscores the fragility of their economy. Historical blunders. Moving on to historical blunders, one of Zimbabwe's significant errors dates back to the late 19th century when the British, Portuguese, and Boers had their eyes on the land. At this time, the British attempted to strike a deal with the local king to mine the land. However, they mistakenly believed they had the right to the land, which was, in reality, owned by Cecil Rhodes, who became notorious for his exploitation of the region's gold resources. Due to these double standards, it was used to be called Rhodesia. It was marked by segregation and racial inequality. The white minority ruled the nation, controlling the economy, the land, and forcing the native population onto reserves. While the British settlers in other African regions had a significant presence, Rhodesia had a much smaller British population, with approximately 50,000 whites by the 1930s. Formation of Zimbabwe. As the 1950s and 60s approached, anti-government groups like ZAPU and NDP began to form. The urbanization of natives and the growth of these movements signaled the desire for change. In the 1960s, Nyasaland and Northern Rhodesia declared independence under African rule, further isolating Southern Rhodesia, now just Rhodesia, under white minority rule. In 1965, Rhodesia declared independence from the UK under a white-dominated government. Subsequently, the Rhodesian Bush War erupted, leading to destruction, casualties, and economic sanctions. It wasn't until the war's end that a new Zimbabwe emerged, under the leadership of Robert Mugabe and the ZANU-PF party. However, far from restoring prosperity, Mugabe's rule was marked by violence, oppression, and the controversial seizure of white-owned land in the early 2000s. During these times, the economy was lacking badly. Under Mugabe's rule, Zimbabwe underwent a series of drastic changes. The government embarked on the controversial seizure of white-owned land to redistribute it to veterans of the Liberation War. However, the land reform program was far from equitable. While the narrative painted it as a means of righting historical wrongs, in reality, it served as a tool for political elites to consolidate their power. This resulted in the displacement of white farmers and a catastrophic collapse of the agricultural sector, leading to a severe food crisis. The consequences of this land redistribution were profound. Zimbabwe's once vibrant agricultural sector was in shambles, and the nation found itself grappling with food insecurity. The lack of training and expertise among the new, often inexperienced black farmers led to a massive drop in food production. As a result, food supplies plummeted by 45%, exacerbating the nation's economic woes. One of the most significant implications of this crisis was the evaporation of investor confidence. Businesses and entrepreneurs grew wary of investing in a nation where their assets could be seized by the government. The flight of skilled professionals and the exodus of foreign investment left a void that would take years to address. Furthermore, international sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union further isolated Zimbabwe. The nation became a pariah on the global stage, exacerbating its economic challenges. It's important to note that sanctions often have a twofold effect. While they aim to pressure governments, they also impact the lives of ordinary citizens who bear the brunt of economic hardships. Tries to revive Zimbabwe. In response to mounting economic instability, the government resorted to printing money. This move was a desperate attempt to bridge the financial chasm, but it led to hyperinflation on an unprecedented scale. At its peak, monthly inflation in Zimbabwe reached around 80 billion%, with an annual inflation rate of 96 trillion%. It was such an astronomical figure that it became difficult to measure accurately. The country's currency became virtually worthless, leading to the issuance of banknotes with absurdly high denominations, such as the $10 trillion bill. The situation became so untenable that Zimbabwe was forced to abandon its currency and adopt foreign currencies like the US dollar and the South African rand to restore some semblance of stability. This move, while necessary, came with its own set of challenges. It meant that Zimbabwe had ceded control over its monetary policy to external currencies, which had their own fluctuations and challenges. Complications. As we talked in the start, the thing that plays an important part in Zimbabwe's situation is its geographical location. It is a landlocked country, meaning it lacks direct access to the sea. To transport goods to foreign markets, Zimbabwe must rely on its neighboring countries, primarily South Africa and Mozambique, which offer access to ports. Unfortunately, the inefficiencies and corruption at border crossings have long been a bane for Zimbabwe's trade. Even if you consider these extra costs and delays as a sort of tariff, they further erode the nation's already fragile economic position. Another thing that adds a lot to it is smuggling. While images of illicit drugs often come to mind when discussing smuggling, Zimbabwe has a different set of contraband: flour, gold, and even a smattering of cocaine. Gold, in particular, plays a pivotal role in Zimbabwe's economy. It contributes significantly to the country's exports, even though its annual gold production is relatively modest, roughly equivalent to the weight of a humpback whale. This peculiar combination of products speaks to the idiosyncrasies of Zimbabwe's economy. Although efforts have been made to stabilize Zimbabwe's economy in recent years, the scars of its tumultuous history remain. Food security remains uncertain, with many Zimbabweans struggling to access affordable and nutritious meals. Life expectancy remains low, and political repression continues to stifle dissent. Hopefully you liked the video and it would be productive for you. Make sure you share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stuff.